When I first came to Keene, Texas, my name was Michael's dad, because he had been here a long time and y'all knew him, but nobody knew me, so I was Michael's dad. And then I became the administrative pastor here, and everybody knew me as Pastor Don. Now I've reverted back a ways, and I'm now Michael's dad. So we're delighted to be here, and Michael's back here today and doing better. Can you say amen to that? You could even give him a hand and tell him you appreciate him, I suppose. When he called me on Monday and told me that he wasn't going to visit with somebody down, and we were going to go down to Dallas and visit our friend who had had a heart transplant, and he called me and said, "Dad, I can't go." I said, "What'd you say?" He said, "I can't go." So, but then he called me on Thursday, and he was speaking fairly clearly. He said, "I can't preach this week." I said, "Yeah, why are you telling me?" And he was just quiet. He just didn't say another word. And I said, "Well, no, I can't do that." And he didn't say anything. He just stayed quiet. I said, "Well, I'll call you back." And so 5 or 10 minutes later, I called him back and told him I'd do this, which is to my gain and maybe your loss. I don't know. We'll have to find out. But we're here today to continue on a little bit with our series in Ephesians. And I think we went through the first part of Ephesians verse 6, chapter 6, and then we got down to the part where it talks about being strong in the Lord and in his mighty power, and put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against your neighbor. You know that? There's nobody, we're not struggling with the world. We're struggling with or against the rulers and authorities and the powers of the dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil. That's where our struggle is. It isn't the guy next door who's playing rock music. It's just not that way. So as we read through this text, we don't have to go very far in that imagery to find people who stand out, people who are heroes. We might even stray into the pathway that helps us find truth. Who knows? We don't have to go far, whether it is in current history or whether it's in current times or in ancient history. I'm going to start with ancient history, because there was a fellow whose name was David, and there isn't anybody in this room who doesn't know who David was. Well, maybe Micah doesn't know. But his father's going to teach him, I think. So, but Paul described David as strong in the Lord. He was strong in the Lord, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10. Be strong in the Lord, it says. And so, as a person strong in the Lord, David had great adventures. His victory over the giant Goliath is an example of some of those great adventures. Have any of you ever read that series about David and all of his adventures? And Shivish or somebody wrote it. And anybody read that series? The books are about that thick. I mean, all of them put together, that is. But he had great adventures, and he gained victory over the giant, Goliath, and that's an example so we can overcome the giants that are in front of us, the giants that trouble our lives. You want to be a hero? Well, the way to do it is get to know God, be strong, and have great adventures. If David didn't know God, then God surely knew him. He enters into our picture with God talking to a fellow whose name was Samuel. He was the prophet. Remember the story? God says to Samuel, I'm sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem, and I've chosen one of his sons to be king. We all know that story. So Samuel's off to Bethlehem. We have stories in the book. Shivish wrote about Samuel running into Jonathan and hiding his little oil thing and all that kind of stuff. I don't know whether he did all that or not, but he does find Jesse, and Jesse sends for his sons. All of them, he says. So they wind up, God says to Samuel, don't consider how tall they are. Don't consider how strong they look. Don't consider how good looking they are. Don't consider any of those things. So he went through all of them. They were all tall and strong and good looking and all that kind of stuff. And Samuel kept saying to himself, surely it must be this one. Then he got down to the end of them, and he said to Jesse, he says, you claim you brought all your sons, but don't you have another son? And Jesse says, he I haven't claimed him, he said. I want you to know that God claims you whether anybody else has claimed you or not. God has claimed you. Sometimes God even claims us who have been unclaimed. Yes, he finally said, there is a youngest one. So God says to him, says to Samuel, he's the one. When he came before him, and so Samuel anoints David in the presence of his brothers, and from that day on, it says, the book says in Samuel 16:13, that the Spirit of the Lord fell upon David in power, in much power. So we can say that God knew David. And he knows his king is not doing well, and he needs somebody to play the harp or the fiddle or whatever. He needs soothed. He needs calmed down a little bit. And we've seen there were those in Paul's household who had seen this son of Jesse of Bethlehem. And they knew that he knew how to play a harp. And he's a brave man, they said, and he's a warrior. He speaks well, and he's a fine-looking man. And the Lord is with him. God knew David. We could talk about all of David's exploits. We could spend 2 hours here or more talking about what David did during the course of his life. So the Israelites go to war. This is one of those. The Israelites go to war against the Philistines, and Goliath is there, this 9-foot-tall champion, their champion. He's the one that's issuing a challenge to all of Israel. He stands out there in the little valley down below where the Israelites camp. So just send one of your people out here. We'll have a fight between the two of us, and whoever wins the war, and the other one will be servants to us. The other group will be servants to the other group. King Saul and the Israelites are hiding in the trees and in tents. Even his brothers are dismayed and afraid. And here comes David. He's on the trail. He's on the way to help his brothers out. His fathers decide to send him lunch. And so David's got his little package of lunch, and he goes down the road and he hears Goliath down there yelling at all the Israelite soldiers. And he arrives in the camp and he says to his brothers, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And his brother says, he's tall. He's a big guy. He's 9 feet tall, and he's got a sword that long. And we don't have anybody that can beat him. He says, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy your armies for pity's sake? You see, heroes are made when we make a choice to do something. And this became David's cause. Well, so the word gets out to Saul that David's in town, and he's been out there chattering about how these armies are making lunch meat out of the Israelites, and Saul calls him to his tent. And David says, I'll go down and fight him. Saul says, well, you're not going down and fight. Yeah, he says, I'll go down and fight. He says, well, you're not going down there unless you're protected. So my armor's there in the corner of the tent. You put on my armor. So when David puts on the helmet and the breastplate and all of the stuff that goes in the armor. And David's not as tall as Saul. And he's not as big as Saul. And so he's got all this stuff kind of hanging down to past his knees. And he looks like the laughing stock of the town. And he goes wobbling out and he tries to do something. And he knows that he can't do that. So he turns around, goes back in the tent. He says, I'm not wearing this stuff. It's not going to work. And Saul says, well, you're going to die. He says, you have to wear that stuff. No, I'm not wearing it. He said, I'm going to take the things I'm used to. And he took a staff and a sling and picked up 5 smooth stones, put them in his pouch. And he started down toward the Philistines. And he said that Goliath looked at him and he said, you think I'm a dog or something? You come down here carrying a stick you're going to beat me with? He said, David says, no. I come in the name of the Lord of hosts, and this day he's going to deliver you into my hands. He throws back his helmet and just laughs at him. That's the funniest thing I've ever heard, he said. The Bible says that then David ran toward his enemies, toward the army, to meet the Philistines, and he put his hand in his bag, and there's one of those stones. And he slung, and he put it in his sling, and he whipped it around, I don't know how many times, and he hit the giant right between the eyes. Down he went. And David went and pulled the Goliath's sword out of his scabbard and cut his head off with it. He didn't even have a sword. He used the giant's own sword. Goliath died by his own hand. And the Philistines all fled. They're gone. They're out of there. You see, Jesus, this Lord that David is serving as the world's greatest superhero. Yet God is calling every one of us to be heroes as well. Heroes are made when you make a choice and take action on that choice. Daniel 11:32 puts it this way. He said, the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. In our culture, we have all kinds of heroes. You know what I mean, Batman and Superman and Spider-Man, and I don't know what kind of heroes we have these days, but you who are younger than I am could probably tell me, but those are the ones that were around when I was younger. There are hundreds, if not thousands of others. These superheroes, by the way, are all just figments of somebody's imagination. There are other times in this more recent history, as you know, history is only about man's inhumanity to man. You know that, don't you? What is all the news about today? It's man's inhumanity to man, and we write books about that stuff, and we call it history. Ever read The Rise and the Fall of the Roman Empire? It's man's inhumanity to man, you know. So in this story, this story is a story of David, but it's a story not only of David, but it's a story of a hero in modern times. Well, not so modern, maybe 50 years ago, 60 years ago. He was a company aide man. Now, many of you here, if you're close to my age, will know about this. On the other hand, those who are not close to my age may not even ever heard of this guy. I don't know. But he was in the 1st Battalion that assaulted a jagged escarpment. It was 400 feet high. And as our troops gained the summit, this is in the Pacific Theater, a heavy concentration of artillery and mortar and machine gun fire crashed down upon them and inflicted about 75 casualties, driving others back. Well, PFC Desmond T. Doss refused to seek cover, and he remained in the fire-swept area for many stricken were there, and they were carried out, and he carried them out one by one to the edge of the escarpment, and there let them down over the edge of the cliff on a litter to friendly hands below. It was May 2. There he had exposed himself to heavy rifle and mortar fire in rescuing wounded men a couple hundred yards from the lines of the same escarpment. And 2 days later, he treated 4 men who had been cut down while assaulting a strongly defended cave. Advancing through a shower of grenades, he went within 8 yards of the enemy forces and in a cave's mouth, where he dressed his comrades' wounds before making 4 separate trips back to the escarpment. He was under fire. He evacuated them all safely. On May 5, he unhesitatingly braved enemy shelling and small arms fire to assist an artillery officer. There he applied bandages and moved his patient to a spot which offered protection for small arms fire, while the artillery and mortar shells fell close around him, and he painstakingly administered plasma. Later in that day, when an American was severely wounded by fire from a cave, PFC Doss crawled to him where he had fallen 25 feet from the enemy position, and he rendered aid and carried him 100 yards to safety while continually being exposed to enemy fire. On May 21, in a night attack on high ground, he remained in exposed territory while the rest of the company took cover. And there he fearlessly risked the chance that he would be mistaken for an infiltrating Japanese soldier. He gave aid to the injured until he himself was seriously injured in both of his legs by an explosion of a grenade. And rather call another man for cover, he cared for his own injuries, and he waited 5 hours until somebody came to rescue him. The trio, the two who were carrying the litter and Doss, were caught in an enemy tank attack, and Doss, seeing a more critically wounded man nearby, crawled off his litter and directed the bears to give the first attention to the other man. While he was waiting for the bears to return, he was again struck, this time suffering a compound fracture of one of his arms. With tremendous fortitude, he bound a rifle stock around his shattered arm as a splint, and then he crawled 300 yards over rough terrain to an aid station. Through his outstanding bravery and unflinching determination in the face of desperately dangerous conditions, PFC Das saved the lives of many, many soldiers. His name became a symbol throughout the 77th Infantry Division for outstanding gallantry, far, far and beyond the call of duty. The first time I saw Desmond Doss was in the 1950s. He was traveling around the country and came to a little town called Granger, Washington. It was his purpose to go around and encourage those who were being drafted into the Army or would be. I was one of those people, not in the 1950s, but in the 1960s. The last time I saw Desmond Doss was in 1994. He'd come to a Pathfinder camporee. And he continued to offer encouragement to the young people who were there. For David, for Desmond Doss, they were giants. There were always giants in their lives. And maybe the giants that we face, maybe not as large as they faced, but they're giants to us nevertheless. Some of us have met small giants. You know, I was in a microbiology lab at Fort Detrick, Maryland. There we ingested pathogens out of what we called the 8-ball, where we sat around and breathed in things that we knew would kill us if we didn't have something to fix it. Today we have better facilities to do things about COVID-19 and other pathogens. We understand them better because those men took a chance and attempted to help humanity. Little things. You couldn't see them, but they sure could make you sick. So remember, most of all, that David picked up 5 smooth stones. And there's some stones for us that we too can carry in our bag, and I'll list them for you. David, number 1, David was anointed. We too have been anointed. And I want you to take that smooth stone and slip it in your bag and always carry it with you. David said, I come to you in the name of the Lord. And both David and Desmond would agree that the power is always in the name Jesus. That's another stone. Slip it into your little pouch and always carry it with you. It's always in the name Jesus. David said the battle is the Lord's, and Paul went on to say, if God is with us, who can be against us? I want you to make that one of your stones that you put in your pouch and always carry it with you. If God is for you, who can be against you? David ran towards the giant because his motto was this: greater is he who is in us than he that is in the world. Carry it. Take the thought. Carry it with you. It's one of David's smooth stones. David prevailed over the giant. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Don't forget that. Because we too can prevail. Take that stone and put it in your pouch and carry it with you, knowing that no matter how difficult times may be, that you can carry that with you and you will prevail. The victory that overcomes the world is our faith. Don't forget it. And it'll always be there for you. People who know their God shall stand firm and take action.
Thanks for stopping by. I hope and pray that this message was a blessing for you. If you'd like to see more content like this, we need your help. You can support the Keene Seventh Adventist Church Media Ministry by going to AdventistGiving.org, finding the Keene Seventh Adventist Church in Texas, and then putting in your donation to the media line. Your faithful giving and support allows us to spread the gospel online for you and others to participate in. Thank you for your continued support of the Keene Seventh Adventist Church.